Greetings, everyone. It is the Sabbath on December 16th, 2023, and we're going back doing a retro of Isaiah 28 through 30. Yep, no, sorry, 24 through 30, and last week I did the same, the first four chapters, so 24 to 28. Now we're doing 29 through 30, so this will be a short one. And Isaiah is really hard in some respects. And Isaiah 29 is particularly difficult because you're dealing with some major distress. And the pain here should be obvious, not just the pain of the people, but God's pain in dealing with this also. So I'm going to start reading and we'll just talk about it. 29 verse 1. Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add you year to year, let them kill the sacrifices. Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel. And I don't know if most people can detect the distress that God has in saying this, but when you look at what is being said directly about this, you see David, and this is the person whom God loved more than anybody else, pretty much at all. And I say that because what did God do? God chose David as his king for the country, and then decided specifically to descend all of the kings from then on from David's seed. Not just while we're here on this planet, but in the kingdom of God all the way through in the New Jerusalem. So there was a reason that God brought up David right here. And he also talks about the time period. Add you year to year and let them kill the sacrifices. The sacrifices were to God. The sacrifices were there to God. And God's saying, okay, they can sacrifice and keep sacrificing to me. And yes, they're doing that to me, but they're doing so many things that I've told them not to do. So he's acknowledging that. At the same time, he's saying, yet I will distress Ariel. And Ariel is the city of Jerusalem. It is the people of God. And when God says he's going to do that, essentially to his bride and to his own body, there is distress in both God and man. Because God feels all these emotions just like we do, only more so, and more accurately, and better. So when he says he's going to distress Ariel, and he knows that his own bride is in the midst of this, it's sad for both him and us. Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel, as my wife. And that, if you don't detect it, is major pain. And I will camp against you round about, and will lay siege against you with a mount, and I will raise forts against you, and you shall be brought down, and shall speak out of the ground, and your speech shall be low out of the dust, and your voice shall be as of one that has a familiar spirit out of the ground, and your speech shall whisper out of the dust. Well, what's all that about? And it makes me sigh and my heart to be heavy when I think about this. Because this is God's people. This is the city of Jerusalem, which is in America right now, amongst the lost 10 tribes, and amongst a lot of Jews and Benjamites. And the fact is that when God says your speech is going to be out of the dust as a familiar spirit, that should be scary. That should be terrifying. Because this is the state that God is going to bring us to in the near future. And we can't avoid it. And we have to walk through it. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will never stop talking about the valley of the shadow of death, because it is inevitable that we walk through it. And you can't control death. We can't control death. Only God can do that. And as you see from above, God's not terribly inclined in this moment. Seek you the Lord while he may be found. Once he rises up in his anger, you're not going to find him. You have to find him before he rises up in his anger, or it's too late. I'm going to read verse 4 again. And you shall be brought down and shall speak out of the ground, and your speech shall be low out of the dust, and your voice shall be as of one that has a familiar spirit out of the ground, and your speech shall whisper out of the dust. They do this really well on some scary movies. Imagine that as your own voice, and you'll be pretty close. Moreover, the multitude of your strangers shall be like small dust, and the multitude of the terrible ones shall be as chaff that passes away. Yea, it shall be at an instant, suddenly. The people that are around us are going to die faster, more quickly. They're going to die suddenly. What happens to the chaff when there's a wheat harvest? You cut everything off, you separate out the wheat, and then light that rest of it with a match, and boom, it's gone. Verse 6, you shall be visited of the Lord of hosts with thunder, and with earthquake, and with great noise, and with storm and tempest, and the flame of devouring fire. Is that how we want to be visited by God? Does he tell us he's going to visit some other way? No. And anybody who's been paying attention at all knows that you're not just going to rapture away before all this happens. And you're not going to go to some place of safety that just, oh, God's going to protect me right there, and us special little few in our little church and whatever. It's horseshit. You've been lied to. Babylon will die. God has spoken it over and over and over again. And the multitude of all the nations that fight against Ariel, even all that fight against her and her munition, and that distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. This is describing the destruction of Jerusalem within Babylon. Babylon falls suddenly, and Jerusalem with her, somewhat prior. And then Babylon falls when all the multitude of all these nations come against God's people. What's so special about Babylon? Well, the biggest, most special thing about Babylon is that God's people are in the middle of it. In the end, and everybody else in the world knows it. And they hate God's people. They really do. And we don't really get that. We don't really understand that. We don't see that. Again, verse 6, you shall be visited of the Lord of hosts with thunder and with earthquake and great noise and with storm and tempest and fire and the flame of devouring fire. And the multitude of all the nations that fight against Ariel, even all that fight against her and her munition, and that distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. It shall be even as when a hungry man dreams, and behold, he eats, but awakes, and his soul is empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreams, and behold, he drinks, but he awakes, and behold, he is faint, and his soul has appetite. So shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against Mount Zion. Ariel, city of David, the people of Jerusalem. Dream of a night vision. You can fight against God and against God's people, but it only lasts a certain amount of time. And it's not a pretty circumstance. It is not at all a pretty circumstance. What happened when Benjamin became the half-tribe? What happened when Benjamin fought against Israel? Or maybe you could say Israel fought against Benjamin because of Benjamin's terrible sexual problem. What happened when the brothers fought? Well, it got really ugly. And I can't remember exactly how many Israelites died, but it was, I think, 24,000 the first day and 27,000 the second day, or something like that. 50-ish thousand men. Maybe I've got it wrong. But approximately 50-ish thousand people died on the Israelite side before any Benjamites died at all. What happens when you fight against God's people? Even when God's people fight against God's people, it's tragic because of God's judgment in this issue. Don't care who you are, if you fight against God's people, it's going to cost you. And it's going to cost you a lot. Which is why that was so hazardous for the Israelites. The Benjamites lost, and half their tribe died. In the end. And this was God's judgment against Israel for fighting against Benjamin, and against Benjamin for being who they were at that time. God doesn't like the Gentiles nearly as much as he likes his own people. What do you think he's going to do to all these people that fight against us? Well, they're going to succeed initially. And then they're going to wish they'd had nothing to ever do with any of it to start with. It shall be even as when a hungry man dreams, and behold, he eats, but he awakes and his soul is empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreams, and behold, he drinks, but he awakes, and behold, he is faint, and his soul has appetite. So shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against Mount Zion. They're going to be like, really? We did that? That did us no good whatsoever. That was horrible. We're still just as hungry as we ever were, only we went through that. Enjoy it in your dream. And then, boom, the nightmare comes to an end, or the happy dream comes to an end, and the nightmare begins because you're fighting against God's people. Verse 9, stay yourselves and wonder. Cry you out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. For the Lord has poured out upon... What happened? We just changed context completely in the middle of a sentence. For the Lord has poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and has closed your eyes. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, has he covered. What in the world is going on here? We're talking about these other nations, and then suddenly God's poured out a spirit of deep sleep upon you. He did that for a reason. Did you go back up there and see where it said you shall be visited of the Lord of hosts with thunder and earthquake and a great noise and storm and tempest and flame of devouring fire? And then he told you about the multitude of all the nations that are going to fight against us. And then what does he say? He says, I'm going to cover you with the spirit of deep sleep and close your eyes, the eyes of your prophets and of your rulers and of all the people that could see this coming. I'm going to blind you from all the things that I just told you I was going to do. You know what all this destruction of this entire country is dependent and reliant upon God's own people and how they behave towards him. That may seem like a no-brainer in the larger focus of things, but when you go through it in the order God goes through it right here, it's pretty clear that he's doing it for this reason alone. It's not some random thing. Sorry about the sunlight. It's really bright and looks like my head's getting cut in half. Anyway, this is happening for a reason, and we're the cause of it. We're not the unfortunate people who have just sort of happened to be in the way and, God's going to protect us from this. We're the cause of this destruction. And while there are a lot of people that God is going to protect, they're not going to be protected as well as they want to be protected. We still have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We still have to walk through it. And most people think that God will protect them by putting them in this little place of safety or taking them entirely out of the circumstance. We're going to live in the circumstance. And the circumstance is going to be all around us. And a lot of people that we know are not going to survive very far into that circumstance. What's around wheat when it's out there growing in the field? The chaff is around the wheat. There are grains near each other, but mostly there's chaff in between the grains and everything else. And that's painful. It's painful when the people around you die around you. Verse 9 again, stay yourselves and wonder, cry you out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. For the Lord has poured out upon you this spirit of deep sleep and has closed your eyes. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, has he covered. He's blinded us all. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, and saying, read this, I pray you. And he says, I cannot, for it is sealed. And this is our Bibles before us when they have been unsealed. You know, the first message I did on Ezekiel, the little roll, the little scroll, the little book. If you don't know that this has been unsealed, then you're missing out. Because the whole Bible is available to us to understand in depth. But our attitude is the problem here. God's delivered his word to us. And we're like, oh, well, I can't understand this. And we take it to somebody else and say, hey, explain this to me. And, the guy's like, oh, well, I don't understand this. It's sealed. It's sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, read this, I pray you. And he says, oh, well, I never learned to read. I can't understand it either. Sorry. Wherefore, the Lord said, for as much as this people draws near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. So it continues, but I'm going to stop right there for a minute because there's too much. We pay attention to his book. We go and ask people for explanations. We say all kinds of stuff, do all kinds of stuff. And our lips are full of God. And our mouths speak about him. But our hearts are very, very far away. How does that make our God feel? How would it make you feel? If your children listened to what you said, mimicked you, and then just did everything else completely wrong. As a parent, how would that make you feel? Yeah, you're right. It would make you angry. And if you're bubbling over with some kind of fake tolerance, then your head's not in the right place. Because when the people who are closest to you laugh at you with their words, essentially mock you by saying these things, and then go the opposite direction completely and don't do anything that you said, it'll make you angry. You made those little people. For mothers, you popped them out of your own body. And here they are, doing everything you said not to, while mocking you with their lips. If you're not angry, then your brain is non-functional. Or you just don't care about your own kids. Mothers are not known for that. But we have absolutely got to pay attention to God in this calm before the storm. Because if we don't, it's going to end badly for us individually. Wherefore, verse 13 again, wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draws near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Fear of God is taught by the precept of men. What does that mean? It means they've taken the fear out of fear. When God says, fear me, he says, fear me who has the power to destroy the body and soul in hell. Don't fear those guys who can just kill your body. God says, I won't just kill your body. I'll kill your body, and then I'll throw your soul in hell and watch it fry in the lake of fire. He means it seriously. He means the very core of who you are, he's going to throw away and destroy if you don't behave properly towards him. That's the fear he's talking about. And we're like, oh, you should fear God because nobody even says that. What am I saying? Nobody even says that. All they say is, oh, love, God is love, God is love, and God is love. And sometimes destruction is the result of love because you don't want somebody to end up like Satan and to live forever in that state. And God's not going to tolerate that. And he's certainly not going to allow anybody in his kingdom that's like that. So he's going to have to kill a lot of people. Like he said just back there. How many times, New Testament or Old, does he say, I'm going to kill all the evildoers and the wicked and etc., the idolatrous, the murderers, the thieves, the everything? When he visits in his anger. So why do we persist in not fearing him at all? He made us like a potter makes pottery. And he can break us just as easily as casting down a pot on the ground. For him, it's even easier than that. And we say, oh, well, I can't really understand this. It's here and I'm reading it, but I can't understand it exactly. I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. If you listen to what I say, you will understand what's going on here. But you have to actually listen and not ignore. You have to listen and perceive with everything that's in your body, everything that's within your soul. Wherefore, again, verse 13, the Lord said, for as much as this people draws near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men, therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord, and their works are in the dark, and they say, who sees us and who knows us? He's going to do a wonderful and marvelous work among this people because their wisdom is going to perish. And the understanding of their prudent men will be hidden. The people who know are going to die or be shut up where they can't hear anything or say anything that can be heard. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord. Oh, well, we're not going to do exactly what God wants us to do, but we're going to sneak around here and do what we want to anyway. And that's almost everybody in this country. And especially within the churches of God. Who can see us? And who knows what we're doing? Nobody's looking. They don't seem to be able to see what we're doing because, well, we've lied to them very successfully, and they believe us. So they can't see our perfidy. They don't understand what has happened. And this is very profitable for us. And that's what these guys are thinking. They're making bank off of God's people because God's people have closed their eyes and said, no, I don't want to see it. Tell me soft things. Tell me things that I want to hear. Oh, but he said it was that way, so it must be that way. This is the way it is, because that sounds so much better than all this mayhem that God's got planned for us. Whatever happened to faith? What ever happened to belief? We've gone so far downhill, and the only way out is through this harvest. And we're going to speak out of the dust as one that has a familiar spirit, because we have ignored everything that God has said over and over and over again, individually and collectively. Verse 16, surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed of him that framed it, he had no understanding? God made us. We're his creation. He knows everything about us. He designed us perfectly from beginning to end to be the way he wants us to be. And he knew when he started this whole process that he was only going to get a relatively small percentage of all the pots made. Only a small percentage of them were going to be good. Because he understood the nature of the material he was working with. And we're not very good material. And you can ask all kinds of questions. Oh, well, why did God do that then? And why did... And there are lots of answers to all those questions. You don't deserve them, particularly. The answers, I mean. You don't deserve them. You were made by God for a purpose. And if you don't serve that purpose, then guess what? You're worthless. And reasons for God's motivations are not, that's not within your realm. You don't deserve that. None of us do. But God gives us insight into his judgments and his motivations. Everything that he has done is taught so that we could learn who he is and how he operates, to teach us who he is, so that we can behave like him. And yet we refuse every single time we get the opportunity. We refuse every single time we get the opportunity, which is every day, which is every moment. Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of him that made it, oh, he didn't make me? How ridiculous is that? That a flashlight would say, oh, no human made me. It's ridiculous. And when we zoom out a little bit, and it's us that God made, it's just as ridiculous as the other. Oh, he didn't make me. Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, he had no understanding? Oh, well, he made me, but he didn't really understand he was making a house. Did a little framing, and suddenly, well, there was a truck with wood, and it was driving along the highway, and it crashed, and all the wood came off the trailer and the truck trailer and landed down off the side of the road, and it all fell just right and became a house. Oh, is that how it? That's how they try and teach you evolution and stuff. That it just sort of. Huh, wow. That's all I gotta say is wow. Verse 17. Is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest? And in that day shall the deaf hear, and the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. Well, we just took a big 180 here, and now we're going in an entirely different direction with the blessings. Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest. In that day shall the deaf hear what? In that day shall the deaf hear what? The words of the book. What book? That one right there, the one we're reading. Not suddenly they can just hear, like their ears didn't work at all. They'll hear the words of the book. And the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. And they'll see what? The things in the book. And understanding will be accomplished. And it's going to be an amazing thing that so many people all of a sudden see and understand and hear so many things that they've ignored for so long. And you have the opportunity to hear and see and understand some of those things now. The question is, will you drink that in like a thirsty man in the desert, or will you say, oh, well, that's not really for me, thanks, but I'd rather be lied to by someone else than hear such hard truths? But this right here is a joyful day. This is a wonderful thing when people actually see the reality of the circumstance that they're in. And the meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. That's verse 19. That's pretty cool. For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off. The people who are watching for sin and for iniquity and for bad things that might be fun, those people are going to be cut off. Not just the sinners, but those that watch for sin. The scorner is consumed, and the terrible one is brought to nothing. Excuse me. And all that watch for iniquity are cut off, that make a man an offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproves in the gate, and turn aside the just for a thing of naught. What does that sound like? Sounds like social media to me. I mean, that's like the epitome of this verse is social media and political correctness and things that are untrue, but masqueraded as true. But make a man an offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproves in the gate. Lay a snare for him that reproves in the gate. Lay a snare for someone who says the words of God against people who are sinning in the gate. There are people that warn other people of the bad things that are going to come. And if you lay a snare for one of those people, God help you, because that's the only help you could possibly get that would do any good. Turn aside the just for a thing of naught, a thing of nothing. It happens all the time. It's constant in this country. We are so distracted by things of nothing that I can't even believe the size of the hole that we're in regarding just that statement alone. It's beyond measure. Verse 22, therefore, thus says the Lord who redeemed Abraham concerning the house of Jacob, Jacob shall not now be ashamed, neither shall his face now wax pale. And again, Jacob. God brings up Jacob randomly in various places. Jacob is when Israel and Judah are reunited in the end time. Jacob shall not now be ashamed, neither shall his face now wax pale. When God saves you, you're not ashamed, and you don't wax pale. Your face shines, and your happiness, your exuberance for life returns, having walked through the valley of the shadow of death. But when he sees his children, the work of my hands, in the midst of him, they shall sanctify my name and sanctify the Holy One of Jacob, and shall fear the God of Israel. And shall fear the God of Israel. Because the God of Israel is scary. Because he's willing to destroy all the evildoers, all the wicked in the entire world. He's willing to do that. Not just willing, he will accomplish it. And even the righteous should be afraid that they'll fall into that category. And in fact, we are in that category. And God releases us in his mercy because we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We shall fear the God of Israel, or we shall not survive. They also that erred in spirit shall come to understanding, and they that murmured shall learn doctrine. Proper teachings, proper understanding. The only way it's going to happen. Chapter 30. So, Egypt is a constant theme through the Bible, in prophecy, not in prophecy, all over the place. And there are a number of places where Egypt is talked about in Ezekiel and in Jeremiah a little bit, and in Isaiah quite a lot. And there's a lot going on in this chapter. The first thing you have to realize when you look at Isaiah 30 is that you're looking at a time period in which God's people are destroyed in part. So most of Isaiah 30 is based in the interstices between the things that are major events that are occurring. And you have to look at this from the standpoint of the people who have partially obeyed, but are not yet returned to their land. And the only people that this really applies to is Ezekiel's hymn. So when you talk about Ezekiel's hymn, you're talking about the people who are at the top of their game in Babylon. But they're still not anywhere near perfect. So they have stood as pillars in Babylon, and they're now leaving Babylon on the eve of the destruction of Babylon, kind of like the Israelites at the edge of the Red Sea with the Egyptians right behind them. And this is kind of the setting for where Isaiah 30 belongs in prophecy. So knowing that you have this group of people that have been oppressed severely and that are now leaving the country that they were physically born in, and returning to the country of their actual nativity, Israel. If you don't understand that when you start reading this chapter, it makes little sense. So, having said that, we'll continue. Verse 1. Woe to the rebellious children, says the Lord, that take counsel but not of me, and that cover with a covering but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin. So this feels like it was in the last chapter, but it actually is a proper chapter spot. So God's people, even the best of them at the top of their game in Babylon, are still disappointing. And we haven't gotten to that point where God's willing to forgive us yet. So we're leaving, and we're still not completely right. And verse 2, that walk to go down to Egypt, and have not asked at my mouth, to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. So we have to go somewhere, but instead of saying, hey, God, where should we go? We start looking for places to go on our own. And that's not okay. That's flat out not okay. Did we learn nothing? It seems like we learned nothing from our destruction, the shame of our destruction in Babylon. We stood up as pillars for one thing, but then can't seem to understand the next thing at all, which is depressing. But there you have it. That walk to go down into Egypt, and have not asked at my mouth, to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. So this is not a new story. Okay, this was written and happened again. And this is not a new story. This is not something that has never happened before. This is a repeat, and it repeats in the end time, just as it has repeated in the past with the Israelites. It's going to do it again. And verse 3, therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt your confusion. If we do this thing and we don't ask God where to go, and I'm not saying I will be there right at that moment, because I won't be there in all likelihood at that moment. I know to ask God, but I also know that things happen, and they happen for reasons. So know that the people that are faced with this challenge should know better, but they don't necessarily. Let's just say that if you go to Great Britain, you go to Egypt, you go to wherever it might be, instead of going back to Israel, when the time comes, go back to Israel. Because if you don't, it's going to get ugly yet again. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt your confusion. For his princes were at Zoan, and his ambassadors came to Hanes, and they were all ashamed of a people that could not profit them, nor be an help, nor a profit, but a shame, and also a reproach. We're not going to be able to help anyone else. When America is destroyed, and those few that escape with, basically on their own recognizance, when they escape, they're not going to be able to help anyone else, even though it might seem on the surface that they can because they managed to escape from Babylon before the destruction. And yet they escaped by the hand of God, and then again appear to be abandoning the hand of God instantaneously because they don't know how to truly look towards him properly. And it only takes a small percentage of those people to sway the rest the wrong direction. It is what it is. Verse 6. The burden of the beasts of the south into the land of trouble and anguish, from whence come the young and the old lion, the viper and the fiery flying serpent. They will carry their riches upon the shoulders of young asses, and their treasures upon the bunches of camels, to a people that shall not profit them. We're not going to go out of Babylon without a few trinkets. Spoil Babylon. Yeah, that was a thing. Will be again. Verse 7, for the Egyptians shall help in vain and to no purpose. Therefore I have cried concerning this. Their strength is to sit still. The people that try and help us have no power besides sitting right there and not doing anything. And it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. People we're talking about, most likely, is Great Britain. And I'm not going to go through all the reasons for that right now. But let's just say that if America goes down, the people who are least likely to spit in our face is Great Britain. And that's not the reasons for why I say that, but this is the reality of the circumstance. Great Britain is more likely to help Americans than anyone else in the world. And yet their strength will be to sit still. Why? You got to put it all together. Who destroys Babylon? The first beast. Who has the strength to fight the first beast? Nobody. Anybody who rises up is going to get sat right back down with some pain. Know that anybody who helps us has no strength. Only God has the strength. Where does God want us? On a little hill. After we've been chased and harried, scurrying our ways across the world, back to our own little hill in Jerusalem, where he will give us an ensign. That's where we're supposed to be. So why would you want to go anywhere else? Go back to Jerusalem when the time comes. For the Egyptians shall help in vain and to no purpose. Therefore have I cried concerning this. Their strength is to sit still. Now go, write it before them in a tablet, a table, a book, and now note it in a book, that it may be for the time to come, forever and ever. This will happen again, not just once, Write it in the book that they know it forever, always. Oh, maybe you meant the verse after this. That this is a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord, or his words, which are law. Which say unto the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, and prophesy deceits. We don't want to hear the true stuff. Just tell us stuff that makes us feel good. Get us settled down, relax us. We don't want this fear thing and this uptightness going on. Whenever one of God's prophets actually talks to us, that's very annoying. We don't want that. We want smooth, soft things. Tell us about this rapture deal where we just get to evaporate. That sounds wonderful. Here, let me give you some money so you'll tell me more nice things like that. Write it before them in a table and note it in a book, that it may be for a time to come, forever and ever, that this is a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord. We cannot behave this way. Which say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, and prophesy deceits. Lie to us. Please lie to us. Get you out of the way, turn aside out of the path, cause the Holy One of Israel to cease from before us. We don't want to see God for real. We'd rather you lied to us and said, we'd much rather you lied to us than to actually see who God is. Wherefore thus says the Holy One of Israel, because you despise this word, and trust in oppression and perverseness, and stay thereon, therefore this iniquity shall be to you as a breach, ready to fall, swelling out in a high wall, whose breaking comes suddenly at an instant. This is how it's going to be in Babylon. This is how it's going to be in the destruction in the day of the Lord. A high wall is a breach, ready to fall, swelling out in a high wall whose breaking comes suddenly at an instant. It's there, it's swelling, it's sticking out, it's leaning out, it's farther, wow, that's kind of serious structural issue. And then it all falls down. That's how it's going to be. Your world, you can feel the stretching and the pressure. You can feel all of it around you right now. The news, everything. Oh, the storms are getting worse because the global warming, and would you like to live in China in November of 23? I don't think so. Or how about Saudi Arabia? Driest desert in the world. Guess what? It's got rivers and it's flooded over your car's roof. We can all feel the pressure rising like a pot on the stove with a sealed lid. Therefore, this iniquity shall be to you as a breach ready to fall, swelling out in a high wall, whose breaking comes suddenly at an instant, and he shall break it as the breaking of the potter's vessel that is broken in pieces he shall not spare, so that there shall not be found in the bursting of it assured to take fire from the hearth, or to take water withal out of the pit. What does that mean? When this breaks, there's not going to be anything left. Manufacturing is going to break. The economy is going to be shredded. Things are going to break down horribly and hugely, massively break down. So much so that it's not recognizable as a pot even. You know, you drop a pot on the ground, it breaks, there's some shards there. He's saying, I'm going to do this. Bam! With that thing. It's going to hit the ground and there's not going to be any big shards left. I guarantee it. For thus says the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest shall you be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. And you would not. If you want to know how to be saved by God in the valley of the shadow of death, it's right here. It's right here. And returning to God and resting in God shall you be saved. In quietness, in confidence. Quietness and confidence. Faith in God. Certainty of faith in God, such that we know that he will save us from this, like Moses in front of the Red Sea. And yet we act like the Israelites, not like Moses. And even worse, we don't even act like we're in that circumstance. Play our video games, we got to entertain ourselves, make sure we got our TV going full blast and whatever's on the radio, and et cetera, et cetera. The whole host of the tables of the demonic. In returning and rest shall you be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. And you would not. We refuse this. We refuse this. It's just sad. But you said, no, for we will flee upon horses. Therefore shall you flee, and we will ride upon the swift. Therefore shall they that pursue you be swift. This little ride out of Babylon is not going to be a pleasant journey without issue. We're going to be pursued. 1,000 shall flee at the rebuke of one, and at the rebuke of 5 shall you flee, till you be left as a beacon upon the top of a mountain, and as an ensign on a hill. Finally, in Jerusalem. And therefore will the Lord wait, that he may be gracious unto you, and therefore will he be exalted, that he may have mercy upon you, for the Lord is a God of judgment. Blessed are all they that wait for him. So impatient. We don't know how to wait for God. We don't know how to wait on God, nor do we know how to wait for him. So we proceed without God in so many things, instead of waiting on him or for him. We don't even understand most people don't even understand what I'm talking about. What do you mean waiting on God? Well, it's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you wait on tables. You wait on the tables. Does that mean you're sitting there doing nothing? No! You're serving the people at those tables. And when you're waiting on God, you're serving God, doing what he wants you to do, obeying him in his shtick, whatever it is he tells you to do. Yeah? Waiting on God. Sometimes we have to wait for him, so that we don't get ahead of what he wants to do. But we have to wait on him, and we have to wait for him. Because if you go without God, ye are godless. And there's another word for godless: dead. For the people shall dwell in Zion at Jerusalem, and you shall weep no more. He will be very gracious unto you at the voice of your cry, and when you shall hear it, he will answer you. Wouldn't that be nice to talk to God and he will answer back? That's the Holy Grail right there. You are become as Moses, whom God was willing to speak to. And though the Lord give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet shall not your teachers be removed into a corner any more, but your eyes shall see your teachers. You will see angels. Notice, though, that the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction before this time. Why? Because we won't just pay attention to him. And we have got to pay attention to God. Only. Yet shall not your teachers be removed into a corner any more, but your eyes shall see your teachers, and your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk you in it, when you turn to the right hand and when you turn to the left. This has always been taught to be part of the millennium. And that's just a lie. Remember when we just read up there about the ensign on top of the hill? We're going to get chased until we're the last thing on this hill. This is the time this occurs in. This is the way, walk you in it, when you turn to the right hand and when you turn to the left. We will be taught properly how to do things. Why? Why will God do that then? Because he's punished us. He's worked us over. He's given us an attitude adjustment. He's knocked us upside the head. He's beat our butt raw. He's done everything it is to get us to where we're supposed to be. And now it's time to teach us, because we are teachable in that moment. Because he's done all of his wonderful works in us, which includes beating the living crap out of us. Because that's what's good for us. Even though we don't like it much. You shall defile also the covering of your graven images of silver and the ornament of your molten images of gold, and you shall cast them away as a menstruous cloth. You shall say unto it, get thee hence. Our idols will go away. We're going to hate our idolatry. We're going to think it's like a used tampon. I'm not inventing words just to be gross in this case. That's what God said. Then shall he give you the rain of your seed, that you shall sow the ground withal, and the bread of the increase of the earth, and it shall be fat and plenteous. In that day shall your cattle feed in large pastures. He's going to give us wonderful things in this time. Wonderful things, excellent things, beautiful things in this time, because he has brought us to that circumstance. The oxen likewise, and the young asses that ear the ground, shall eat clean provender, which has been winnowed with the shovel and with the fan. And there shall be upon every high mountain and upon every high hill rivers and streams of waters in the day of the great slaughter, when the towers fall. He's proving to you that this isn't some millennial lie. That word is taken on an entirely different meaning. Not a lie by millennials. The point is, though, that when God gives us the rivers of living water and all these different things and all these nice places, it's going to be in the day of the great slaughter, when the towers fall. He's putting a little timing element in there to tell you that this is when it happens. It doesn't say anything about, Christ coming back with his vesture dipped in blood and, saints rising to meet him in the air. That's not the timing of this. Never in the context of anything that is talking about any of this at the beginning of the kingdom are any of those contexts in there. I can say that with absolute certainty. It doesn't say that anywhere. This happens right after the fall of Babylon. God's people are up in the air for 42 months, more or less. Various circumstances, depending upon who you're with. Most people are going to be scattered across the face of the earth. In the day of the great slaughter, when the towers fall. All this happens right after that. Moreover, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold, as the light of 7 days, in the day that the Lord binds up the breach of his people and heals the stroke of their wound. The iniquity of that land is removed in 1 day. Back in Zechariah. I can't tell you how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of different places where it talks about this context in the prophets. May not be enough verses for thousands, but it's spoken of many, 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 many times. Again, moreover, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold, as the light of 7 days, in the day that the Lord binds up the breach of his people and heals the stroke of their wound. And for some people, the light of 7 days in 1 day will be a negative thing. Man, it's going to be hot. It's not really what it's referring to. Things are going to grow. Things are going to be spectacularly productive. And at night, you're going to be able to see better. And the turtles will find their way home, at least any of them that are in the Mediterranean, or at least this end of the Mediterranean. This is going to happen around Jerusalem. Maybe it'll happen all over the planet. Maybe it'll be negative in some places, and maybe it'll be positive in others. I don't know. What I do know is that this is a time when God's talking about these things being good things. Is that because God's right up above Jerusalem and his light, the light of the sun is magnified from him? Very possibly. There are other explanations, though. God could, do a variety of different things. there are heavenly things that can happen. And when I say heavenly, I mean as in the physical heavens. You know, our galaxy could get turned on. All galaxies at one point or another can become, it's escaping me all of a sudden. The center of the galaxy can actually turn white hot for a while, and there's a lot of light generated. And the word's not coming to me. Oh well, it doesn't make any difference. There are lots of different ways that God could do this. The reality is that when he does this, it'll be a good thing to have more light. It'll be a good thing for us. Well, you know that. In the day that the Lord binds up the breach of his people and heals the stroke of their wound. It's a moment of healing. So some extra light's not going to hurt anything. God is light. The strongest of light. Verse 27, behold, the name of the Lord comes from far, burning with his anger, and the burden thereof is heavy. His lips are full of indignation, and his tongue as a devouring fire. And people say God's love, and the face of this, I think, man, their brain is not turned on. God is love. But when God's angry, he's angry. Does that mean he loses control? Not at all. He controls it precisely, exactly. He kills whom he wants to kill and saves alive whom he wants to save alive. You should fear him in this because it's his choice whether you live or die. Because you made a choice in your life whether you would hear and fear God or not. Huh? Didn't you? Aren't you? Doesn't everybody make the choice whether they like it or not? We all make the choice. Few people make the right choice. Few there be that enter in at the narrow and strait gate. Many there be that enter in at the gate of death, the broad gate, the path to destruction. People just don't seem to be able to realize that, oh, well, God would never kill most of humanity. That's just ridiculous. What a naive little place to live. God's more than willing to destroy most of humanity to get the few that he wants out of this process. It's a manufacturing process for him. He's making something. The stuff that comes out right, yay! The stuff that comes out wrong, eh. Is he cold and heartless about it? No. He is willing to accept anyone who will do it right. Anyone who will do it the way he wants it done. Any pot that comes out of this correctly, he will accept. But if you're no good for his purpose, and he created you and you chose not to be good for his purpose, what's he going to do? The whole idea here is that he creates something, sons and daughters. He creates something that's worthwhile out of things that are greater than just pot shards. Are people more important than pots? Yes. but he wants people, not pots. God could make all the perfect pots in the world. Every single pot he made would be perfect and it would be exact. But we're not making pots here, people. We're making people. And God says, the souls that I have made. And the thing about souls is they have a choice. We have a choice. Every single person on this planet has a choice whether they follow God or not. Save a few vessels of destruction who cannot get out of their purpose. When God makes you to destroy, intentionally there to destroy, he does it well, and he does it correctly. If it were just pots, God could make them flawlessly every single moment of every single day. But to build people with character who choose well, with wisdom, and who see beyond just the surface and understand better than just what's right in front of them. People like that are hard to come by. And we all know this. We all know that half the people that we're around on an everyday basis are absolute nitwits. We know this. Listen to the words that come out of your mouth about the people that are around you. We know this. But the things that are important to God are not important to man. And that's why he chooses many times the weak and the base things, the things that are not, to bring to naught the things that are. He chooses the people with the right attitude and the right understanding and the right belief, the people who see the underlying importance of why it's important to behave in an honorable fashion in everything, and whose honor aligns with God's. Why? So that we can live in perfect harmony forever. Because living in a demonic society like the one we live in, it's not worth it forever. It just gets worse and worse and worse until it implodes. And it gets worse and worse and worse until it implodes again. And then it gets worse and worse and worse until it implodes again. And what are you left with after all those implosions? Demons. Twisted, distorted, dysfunctional, utterly, totally dysfunctional beings that are utterly miserable in every way. And God's not willing to put any of us through that. He'd rather kill us than us go to that extent. And thus he destroys body and soul in hell. Verse 27 again, behold, the name of the Lord comes from far, burning with his anger, and the burden thereof is heavy. His lips are full of indignation, and his tongue is a devouring fire, and his breath as an overflowing stream shall reach into the midst of the neck to sift the nations with the sieve of vanity. And there shall be a bridle in the jaws of the people, causing them to err. And you shall have a song as in the night, when a holy solemnity is kept, and gladness of heart, as when one goes with a pipe to come into the holy mountain, into the mountain of the Lord, to the mighty one of Israel. So we got two things going on here at the same time. Do we not? We do. We have two things going on. This is what's happening to the nations now, because he's already spent his indignation on us, and now he's destroying these other nations. And meanwhile, we're down here enjoying ourselves. In verse 29, I guess it changes back again in verse 30. And the Lord shall cause his glorious voice to be heard, and shall show the lighting down of his arm with the indignation of his anger, with the flame of a devouring fire, and with scattering and tempest and hailstones. And the Lord shall cause his glorious voice to be heard to everyone, and shall show the lighting down of his arm. That's one of the two witnesses. Don't be mistaken. With the indignation of his anger, and with the flame of a devouring fire, with scattering and tempest and hailstones. For through the voice of the Lord shall the Assyrian be beaten down, which smote with a rod. All of a sudden, we're suddenly talking about Assyrians. Well, after the beast destroys Babylon, he goes on a rampage for about 3+ years, 42-ish months. He does what he wants. Cuts off nations, not a few, takes down some islands, does various things. And then he comes back to destroy Jerusalem and the people who escaped him from Babylon. Only when he comes down, there's a problem. For through the voice of the Lord shall the Assyrian be beaten down, which smote with a rod. God talks to this guy. Has a little red carpet moment. Maybe not red carpet, but on the carpet moment. And when you get called onto God's carpet, you better watch out. But they make it all the way to the edge of Jerusalem. They don't enter the city, but they make it all the way there with that giant army. We talked about that in the last one. Drags them down there. And then he talks to this Assyrian. Smote with a rod. And in every place where the grounded staff shall pass, which the Lord shall lay upon him, it shall be with tabrets and harps, and in battles of shaking will he fight with it. To me, I just find it amusing and hilarious, because God puts these verses in this order that is unintelligible to most people. It's just like Sanskrit to someone who's not from India. What's he talking about now? So he's not talking about the Assyrian. The voice of the Lord will beat down the Assyrian, which smote with a rod, but he's actually going to give a grounded staff to his arm, which you mentioned up here, the lighting down of his arm. And this grounded staff is pretty cool. We have another superhero weapon. The only superhero weapons and superheroes we've had have been biblical super ones. So now on the TV and all that, we have all these superheroes. But who's the first original superhero? Yeah, Samson. Samson was a superhero. God tested all that business out for us and showed us what the results of all that is. Samson had super strength, and he was the first superhero. More or less. He was the first superhero of that nature. So Moses, you could say, all right, Moses was a superhero because he used God's power. But Samson had that power absent necessarily. I say absent, but God wasn't talking to him at any time, and he could use his power at his will, at his own will, which was unusual because typically things are done through God directly and only. But he was given a superpower in that way, and then he was also given his what's the word I'm looking for? His Superman's eh, the dirt or whatever from the planet he was from that made him powerless. You have to you have to turn on your microphone if you're going to tell me, because I can't remember. Brain goes dead on these things. Anyway, the point is that this is the circumstance we're in right here when God gives this grounded staff to one of the two witnesses, the first of the two witnesses, I'm betting, which the Lord shall lay upon him. It shall be with tabrets and harps, and in battles of shaking will he fight with it. It's like, all right, bam, an earthquake happens.
Superman.
I know Superman. What was the stuff that he... Kryptonites. Kryptonite, that's it. Finally came to me in the last second. So, yes, his kryptonite was Delilah. Samson's kryptonite was Delilah. And God tested all that out. And it wasn't that he was just testing it out, he was also giving us that example to be used in the judgment. So that when the judgment came around, he can say, all right, well, this is what I did with that, because you're going to say that, you could. People are going to have all kinds of excuses. They're going to bring up all kinds of things in the judgment. And God's already done everything to be able to answer every argument that anybody could possibly bring in the judgment for why they're righteous and just and innocent and don't deserve to be thrown into hell. And yet God has fixed every circumstance so that no cockroaches ever enter his kingdom with the law and with his judgments. But this moment here is back in Isaiah 30 is pretty amazing, because we're seeing some of those powers being used that God does not typically do. We know he will give the two witnesses superpowers directly. If anybody tries to fight against them, the Spirit will come out of their mouths like fire and burn up anyone who does such things. The one's going to have the grounded staff, which earthquake, and whatever, How do men fight against someone else when that person has the ability to cause earthquakes? And it's kind of funny that we don't understand the things of God so much that we think that he would never do something like that. He will do stuff like this. And it's different than anything we've been taught or told. Pretty interesting. Verse 32 again, in every place where the grounded staff shall pass, which the Lord shall lay upon him, it shall be with tabrets and harps, and in battles of shaking will he fight with it. So imagine Moses with his arms in the air, only this is one of the two witnesses with some musicians behind him apparently playing, or maybe the angels, I don't know. And when somebody does something he doesn't like, pretty amazing. And then we go to Isaiah 33. 30, verse 33. For Tophet is ordained of old, yea, for the king it is prepared. He has made it deep and large, and the pile thereof is fire and much wood, and the breath of the Lord like a stream of brimstone does kindle it. Anybody God wants to destroy, he will absolutely, categorically destroy without mercy. Because when you've proven that you will not obey God in any way, shape, or form, when God rises up in his anger, he will destroy all evildoers and all of the wicked. It's a guarantee. It's a certainty. He's spoken it over and over and over again. And in the process of that, his people are going to come out of it clean and washed and with the blessings of God. And that is an absolutely amazing thing. I think we'll end it there.